Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and we're making one last trip into pop manga here, and today we're going to focus on doing a background. So here is our narwhal friend with his two little friends, and we've used some really vibrant colours here and we've really gone for it with the whole pop manga feel. So what we're going to do is a much more muted background. And I felt the best way to facilitate this was to use a combination of water-soluble media. The first thing that had popped into my head to get that kind of muted background was the Derwent Graphitint pencils, and I realised that that's quite a substantial feat for the amount of background space that we've got. So I decided to go halfway with that, and I've got here the little Graphitint paint pan set instead. So these are the same colours and it's the same formula as the pencils, they're just in pan form, so they're a bit easier to work with in terms of covering larger areas. The downside to this, of course, is that you have to activate it before it goes on the paper, whereas with the pencils you can shape or favour areas before actually putting any water near it, which gives you more time to work with it when it actually comes to activating it. So that's the downside to the pans. As a counterbalance to that, I have my Neocolor 2s here. These were gifted to me by a caver, which is probably one of the most generous gifts I've had actually. The set of 30 Neocolor 2s. So these are water-soluble crayons, which still absolutely blows my tiny little mind, but these are fabulous and they're quite vibrant as well. But we can work with these on the paper dry and then activate them with water. So this combination here, I've got bright colours, muted colours, and I've got the ability to go in a paint-like manner, but also the ability to draw dry and then work with water later. So that's the plan. That is the plan. And in order to waterize things, I'm going to be using my Zig H2O water brushes. These are the brushes that I use all the time. I'm very picky about water brushes. I do also like the Pentel water brushes. Some people don't like these ones. The Pentel brushes are a good second choice for me. I will put links to both of those, probably Amazon links, down in the description if you are in the market for a decent water brush. Okay, so when I'm thinking about the background here, I've split the page into thirds, not equal thirds though. We have the ground, so the area that the Mernar made walls are sitting on, because they are sitting on something, and there looks to be gravel or something down the bottom here. And then this would obviously be water. Now when we think about the depths of the ocean, the further from the surface we are, the darker it gets because there's less light penetrating. So this section here, I would think would be a lot darker than this section here. So that's kind of, when I'm starting to think about colour, that's what I'm thinking about. And I'm also thinking to myself, there is no reason for me to have to fill this entire page with colour. That's another option as well. Don't always feel compelled to obliterate every single piece of white that you see, because sometimes you don't need to and sometimes less is more. Okay, so to get us started, I'm actually going to start on the bottom part here, and I am going to use a combination of the Meadow, which is a lot darker, and this looks really yellow on the swatch. It's actually much more green than that. So a combination of the Meadow and the slate green for our base here, what's going to essentially be the ground. So I'm going to start with the Meadow. I'm just going to loosely follow these stones or pebbles or whatever they are. I'm not actually going to spend a lot of time getting each individual part. So I'm using a flat brush here and I'm working it sideways like so. And that is so that I can work in the other colour as well. So I'm going to halt it there. I'm just going to do one side at a time because this stuff does dry quite quickly. So clean off the edge of my water brush here. Doesn't matter if there's a little bit of residue there, it's not imperative. And then I'm going to go into the slate green here. Make sure I've got a reasonable amount on the end of this brush. Again, I'm just testing it on a scrap of paper just off to the side there. And then I'm going to start to fill in the gaps here. Now see, this is still damp, so it will pick up some of the Meadow colour, which is absolutely fine because we do want it to kind of blend together a little bit. One of the things about this book is this paper does not take water well, so by using the water brush I'm keeping the water content to the minimum because the page is starting to buckle quite considerably already, which is fine. I mean, you know, these colouring books aren't designed for this sort of thing, and it's nice to be able to do it, but don't expect miracles. You know, the paper has its limits. To say it's not really designed for stuff like this. So now I'm just going back over with very, very little water. I'm not squeezing at all here, and that's one of the reasons I like these pens, is that the water let down is very consistent and I have a lot of control over it. But I just want to darken this down. So I'm jumping between my two colours here and just letting that sort of blend together, but as I say, make it a bit darker. So we'll come back, we'll deal with some shadows and things at the end once everything's dry. But the idea here is just to get the colour down. So I'm going to move over to this other side now. So I kind of left to right motion there. I'm just jotting that up there. I'll get some of these gaps with a smaller brush. Okay, so using my smallest water brush now, which is this little yellow one, it's got a weeny type nib on it. I'm just going to work in these smaller areas here. Again, the nooks and crannies, or the fiddly bits, as we like to say. Just make sure we've got everything. Alright, so now that our base is nice and dry, we're going to tackle the bit further up now. Now what I want to do is give the impression of the fact that there might be some light coming down even though it's in behind, but we do want to keep quite a muted feel to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is tackle the shafts of light, and I was thinking maybe 4, so 1 here and then 2 in the middle that would disappear off in behind. So naturally the ones on the outside are going to be more important, but just because they're more visible than anything else. So what I'm going to do is map them out first before I put any water in them, because I'm going to use the Neil colours for this. So I have the white Neil colour, and I also have a light blue as well. And the idea here is that we want to have it light at the top and darker as it comes down to the bottom, and eventually that will disappear into the darkest part here, as we discussed at the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the light blue. And I just want to map a rough trajectory in my mind here. If it's more comfortable for you, you can mark these out with pencil, just a graphite pencil, to use as a guideline. But I'm quite happy to just go for it. So I'm thinking here is probably where I would want the darkest part to be. So when we're using our nail colours, we really don't have to be careful with them. It's your brush and the water that's going to do the work. So all you need to do is make sure you've got the right amount of colour down that you need. So I want this to be more intense around here. I've kind of got the crease of the book to contend with as well, but that's okay. And as I'm coming up here, I want to lighten this up. And then I'm going to take the white and I'm going to run that into the blue, because we're going to blend that together. So there's going to be a transition phase in this sort of area here. And I am going to take this all the way up to the top. I'm keeping it in a fairly straight line, and I'm trying to keep it an even thickness all the way up. Again, it doesn't have to be uniform. Number one, this is a background, but secondly, we're talking about water here, so you know. And plus as well, we're going to be blending in at the sides as well, so that's going to affect it too. So I'm thinking about my middle two here, so my second one's going to be about here. And then I grab my white. Now this is a slightly off-white, which is helpful because we can see it against the colour of the paper. I don't know how obvious it is on camera, but it's very easy to see with the eye, which is great. Okay, so that's going to be coming out somewhere up there, that's fine. And then this one's going to be about here maybe, so our lightest part's going to be here. Now this is a bit unfortunate that it's going to be in amongst our girl's hair here, but there is a finishing touch that I'm going to put on that will remedy that situation, so it's not really a big deal, honestly. Okay, so most of the transition's going to be in behind there as well, which is A-okay. And we'll get the white in there as well, and behind our narwhal friend. And then we're maybe going to have one coming from here. This one's at a bit of a jaunty angle, I'm going to have to fix that. Again, the best way to do this is a section at a time, so I'm going to come down here. This is a great place to start, so I'm really just concentrating on this little section here, and I'm taking the dark indigo Graphitint, which again I'm just going to show you on a little piece of scrap paper here so that you get an idea for where we're going. So it's very dark, it's very rich, but that's half the fun. And I'm going to start this off at the very bottom here, and I'm just going to start going back and forth with that and just let it fade out naturally there, so you can see I'm creating a gradient without really trying. So once that paper's wet, I can add in a little bit more. And I really want that just in that bottom section there. And as we're coming up, I'm just letting that fade away. Because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the ocean blue. Again, if I show you here. So a slightly lighter, more bluish colour. And we're going to take that and mix it in with our indigo down there. And we're going to start to blend our neo colour in here. So we want up and down strokes here. And you can see that's blended in nicely. And we're just going to blend that up. So we're going into the white here. Just going very gently either side. Now if I go back to my ocean blue here, I can start in at the corner and just take that up the side of our ray of light there. And just let that get lighter and lighter as it heads up towards what would be the surface. And we're going to do the same on this side now as well. So just make sure that's blended in with what you've got at the bottom there. And as we come up to this top part, we can ease up on the pressure a little bit. Now it's up to you how far up you want to take the darkness. Wow, that sounds sinister. It's entirely up to you. I am thinking just sort of just past the halfway mark and just have a hint of colour at the top there. That's really my thinking. But as I say, it's entirely up to yourself. As long as you've got that definition with your shafts of light, because that's really what the effect that we were going for here. As long as you've got that, and I suppose it doesn't really matter how far up you take things. So when I'm doing that, I'm using that upward stroke. And you can see that's given us quite a nice effect here, both with the Graphitint and with the neo colours as well. Blend that out a little bit. And I want to just clean my brush off here, because when I'm blending the neo colour together, I want it to not have any of the Graphitint in it. I want that to be a nice clean line for obvious reasons. So go up into the white, there we go. And then I can go back to working my ocean blue in here. I'm going to put a little bit in here, and I'm going to have to work it out because obviously that's going to be too dark there for in keeping with the rest of the picture, but that's okay, we can work away at that. Work around that stirrup a little bit. Okay, so you can see the effect that I'm going for, and I'm just going to work my way across and do the same thing, keeping most of these areas in behind our mermaid walls. Pretty dark. So I'll catch you back up over this side when we get back down to doing this. I'm just going to fill in the gaps in this middle section here. Mermaid walls, goodness me. So for these little sections in here, I'm going to go back to the small round brush that I was using before, just because I need precision to get into these little gaps. I mean, this is going to be fairly dark in here as well, so I've nothing to worry about really. Just try and keep that same upward stroke and blend it in with the neo colour at that edge there. I've just come up to the top here. I'm just going to add in a tiny bit. This is like a really diluted bit of the ocean blue, because I just feel as if I want a little bit of colour up here in this middle section. So in between strokes, I'm dabbing off the brush, because obviously the brush is picking the pigment back up to a degree as well. So just in that middle part there, I feel as if I need to have just a little bit of something in there. So if I zoom out to show you, just so that it keeps the picture tied together, because I don't want a white band along the top here because it just makes it look unfinished. I have more room for manoeuvre in this section here because it's wider, but I'll be doing similar to what I did down here with that part. So again, I'm just going to get started with that again. So we're back to the dark indigo at the very bottom here, and we're just going to put this band along the bottom. And we can work away at mixing it in with everything else that we're going to fling at it. I'll deal with that little section separately. Okay, and then we're going to switch back to our ocean blue, which is the star of the show, and just get that blended in there to start with, and then we can start working up the way just as we've been doing. Now I'm doing this part at the bottom first just because I want to eliminate that tide line. No pun intended. It's important because if you get that while it's still wet, it's much easier to work it out. So I'm going to start working this now here. clean off my brush a little bit here. Get that Neo colour on the go. And again, make sure that tip's clean before we start that transition from the blue into the white. Look at these are really pretty. Okay, so let's do that. There we go, lovely. And then we can just bring that down there. It's really nice to see that little pop of blue in amongst the grayer colours here, and without it taking away from our girls here, because obviously these colours are really, really bright, and that's why I was really cautious picking the colours for this. So now I'm going back to my ocean blue, and I'm going to start to... Oh, I've gone over our knuckles. Dang nabbit. Just going to start to work this up the way. I was really trying to avoid that. I'm very disappointed in myself. I was hoping to keep the image of the girls, you know, the main part of the image as clean as possible. Ever the consummate professional, you know. Never mind. Okay, so I want to keep a kind of consistent-ish colour across this section here, which isn't always the easiest thing to do, but we'll just build it up gently. It'll look as if it's meant to go together. Sometimes these things work better than others, but that's not bad at all. I will take that. Put a little bit of Graphitint in there. Okay, again, so for this little section here, I'm going to do similarly to here. So when I'm lifting my my Graphitint off, the ocean blue, I'm actually taking most of it back off the brush on a sheet of paper because we don't want this concentration. We want it more like this. So if I do that, you can see it's starting to lighten up now. That's much more what we want to work with. So I can pop that down there, and you can see it's not quite as dark, and by the time I spread this out across this entire area, it's going to look a little bit less conspicuous and a little bit more in keeping with what we're after here. There's quite a lot of white there, which is interesting. Okay, so there's this last section down here to do now, and that's us got the bulk of it covered, and I'll just do some finishing touches after that. That'll be fine. Okay, so now I'm back to using my wee teeny tiny brush, and I'm just going to pop like the smallest, smudgiest bit of this dark indigo in here, in this little section here. Oh, it's so tight. And then take most of that off my brush and head straight back into my ocean blue and get that blended together. Get that, zip that up the way. Again, all I'm doing is trying to match it up with what's going on next door. I don't think that looks too bad at this juncture. Okay, so we're looking fairly watery. I'm sure you'll agree. I am sure you will agree. Right, the next step is just really some finishing touches. Now, I do need to let a lot of this dry, but down at the bottom here, there's just a few little areas that I need to get into, and I'm just using the ocean blue here. There's no point in complicating these things because we're talking about tiny little areas here. So I'm just filling them in with one colour. I'm not doing anything even remotely sensible or technique-y. I literally just got rid of the white there. Right, okay, so if we focus back down on this bottom section just now while our water is drying, what I want to do is I want to take my smallest brush and I want it to be quite dry. So I'm taking off all the excess I can, and I'm going to grab the steel blue, which is this colour here. So you're about as dark as you're going to get. And I want this to be really concentrated because I'm going to use this for a shadow. So you can see there, it's pretty dark. And this is just to ground our little mermaid holes. So I don't want this diluting itself. We want these characters to look as if they are actually resting on something and not floating about. So I'm just going to outline everything that's supposed to be sitting on the ground. I'm then taking off all of the excess colour off the brush, making sure it's clean, and then I'm going back in and I'm just going to soften out the bottom edge so that it blends in a little bit with the actual ground, like that. So we've got a shadow, but it's not a really, really harsh line. And to be honest, it doesn't matter if it is a harsh line, because obviously this is a very cartoonish sort of illustration. So that actually might be quite fitting. But again, we want this contrast. I say we're kind of trying to ground the figures here to make them look like they are resting on something. Again, in under here, maybe in this part of her hair. So anywhere where you think parts of their bodies or whatever are resting on the seabed. Now when this dries, you can see it's not drying with a really, really harsh line. And just for a little finishing touch now, just to finish off, I would like to grab a white Posca pen or similar paint pen if you prefer gel pens. I really like the Uni Posca 1MR because it's got a really, really fine nib on it, so I'm just going to give that a good shake. Whoa. To make sure these pens are flowing properly, I always have coloured post-it notes nearby, and this is obviously for the white one because you can't really see it on white paper. And weirdly, this is just something I've always got to hand. It's always been sat on my desk. Right, there we are, we're good, we're on the move. I'll zoom in a little bit here. So I want to pop in some of these bubbles. They're fun. They belong there, they look as if they should be there. And see, these will stand out beautifully. Now, I have mentioned this quite a few times before, but especially when you're using water-soluble media, if you are going to use a paint pen, what will happen is the white will suck up the pigment of what's underneath, so in this case the blue, and it will start to dull it, and it's starting to happen here. Don't worry about that. If you go over it a second time, you should get a much better result. Sometimes if it's really dark, maybe like this indigo colour down the bottom here, it might take three attempts. But as I say, don't panic about it. It's just one of those things, and it's one of those characteristics of just like the nature of the pens. I've actually got a bubble down here, so let's test that theory out, because that's a fairly dark area down there. I'm just going to turn to the side here so that I don't put my hand in these ones. Oh, bit of a wayward hand there. And there we have it. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I see these ones down here, they have started to fade away quite significantly, but once they've dried, I'll go back over them. If you're not happy with the amount of contrast here, you know, if you've maybe used heavier blue, the other thing that you can do as well is use your white Posca pen just to put in some accents around the top of the head, you know, to stop it merging in and give you a really distinct line. I don't feel that that justifies it because this colour is much more vibrant, so I'm going to leave it. And I am going to call it done at that. So there we go. There is a relatively muted background, which sounds really unexciting, but as you can see, it's turned out just the way we wanted it to, and it really complements the bright colours of what's going on in the foreground. So I hope you've learned something today, and I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks very much for joining me with this picture. I'm really glad I came back to it, and it's nice to be back colouring as well now that my elbow will allow it. So we shall discuss very, very soon our next colouring project, and you can give me your input as to what you would like to see done next. So thanks very much for watching. Thanks for coming and hanging out. You guys know I always appreciate it, and I will see you back in the cave really soon for another video. Have a great day, everyone. Bye bye for now.